A Malazan fan responded to my video. Okay, I know I said I was done with my Malazan journey, but this is the first time I've ever received a response video from someone else, and I just had to react to it. Alright, and as we can see here, how do you read Malazan? Book of the Fallen, reacting to libraryofaviking. I mean, I never expected anyone to send a response video to me, so that is quite funny, but I must admit, I've actually watched through this once, but I really enjoyed it, and since I've been a bit negative or slash struggling with this series, I thought it would be a great opportunity to actually highlight someone's viewpoints that actually loves the series so much, because really, there are so many people out there that absolutely love the series, and you really shouldn't decide if the series is for you only based on if I enjoyed it or not. So let's highlight this other viewpoint and have a look at it.
So over the past few months, I've been making book reviews about Malazan, Book of the Fallen.
Yeah, so the first intro is just him talking about how he's watched this video, and then basically he's just going to give some tips first on what he would recommend people that are starting the series to think about, and also just give some advice on how they can get through it and so on. And then the later half, he actually reacts to my video. But yeah, let's go through some of the points he's actually mentioning here.
So I think one of the most important things to remember when you're getting started with this series, everybody knows already. Everybody who's getting into the series, who's read anything about it, we all know, okay, nothing's explained. Erikson just drops you into the series. You shouldn't expect to understand the overall plot of the series.
All right, you shouldn't expect to understand the overall plot of the series, which I think is a really interesting and great point. And it is really helpful to at least keep that in mind. But it also has to be acknowledged that one of the main reasons why people don't enjoy the series is because you're told you're not supposed to expect to understand the plot at all. But I really think that this highlights how readers are different, and also their threshold with how much they're willing to accept of not understanding something. And I think Malazan is, without a doubt, one of the most challenging series to read that I've ever come across.
For several books. Some people might be totally put off by that, but I think it honestly gives you a lot of room to focus on other details of things that are going on in the book. One of the things that I realized early on as I was reading the book is that it's very important to focus on each character and the experiences that these characters are going through.
So that is a very interesting point about focusing on the characters, because one big issue, or I wouldn't even call it an issue, but a significant challenge I had with this series is that I didn't connect with the characters at all. And even when I tried to focus on the different characters and their experiences, I just didn't find them that compelling, or I didn't really feel like I cared about them, which was really unfortunate. But it's so fascinating to hear someone that absolutely loved the series talk about the importance of focusing on the characters, because I think that is one of the main reasons why I didn't connect with the series, is because of the characters. All right, let's get to the next point.
And many times Erikson is trying to deliver you a story, but he's also trying to deliver you philosophy in a way. Like, I don't want to get too crazy about it, but there's so many different points in this series where he's telling you a story, but he's also delivering a lesson to be learned.
Yeah, I think that is a very valid point, and I think that is one of my main takeaways with reading Malazan, are really the themes of human nature, the brutality of war, and the struggles of life, and so on. I mean, Deadhouse Gates, which is a book I still haven't finished yet, even though I really struggle with it, I really felt how brutal warfare in the world was, and I think really the brutality of life is really emphasized in Malazan. And I know a lot of people talk about like how it's quite philosophical and so on, and maybe that becomes an even bigger part later on. But yeah, if you absolutely love themes, I think Malazan seems to be a series that is very heavy on themes, and that is probably also the reason why people love it so much, because it really activates your brain and makes you think deeply about some aspects. So I can definitely appreciate that. All right, let's go to the third point.
The series is also a good way to exercise your imagination. You know, like we said many times, it's not a series where things are explained to you directly. So what it does is it gives you a lot of room to draw your own connections and create your own ideas about what might be happening and why things might be going on.
Yeah, that is so interesting, and I absolutely love this, because a big thing with Malazan is that you're not being spoon-fed anything. But it's interesting to see that how Taylor, he even goes further and say like you can almost make up your own hypothesis of what is going on here. You can imagine where does these characters come from, or why does the world work in a certain way. While most fantasy books will usually tell you quite a lot about the world to make you understand it, Malazan or Steven Erikson definitely withholds a lot of that information. And Taylor, he absolutely loved that aspect, that you have to really work hard and really activate your imagination, which I think that most fantasy books definitely do in some ways. But yeah, as I mentioned before, Malazan just takes this aspect to a whole another level, and Taylor loves it. And for me personally, it just didn't work, but I just love hearing his points. All right, let's go to the next point.
Book. I think this has been said many times before, but I think something to keep in mind is that have faith that things will be explained eventually. and that things will start to make sense.
Yes, and so many people say that this series is so ridiculously rewarding because you put so much work into it, and finally everything just starts to click, and finally you understand where the series is going, and people have this huge sense of reward. But for me personally, I also wanted the journey leading up to that big reveal, or that big sense of now I understand everything, also to be fun and rewarding, and I just didn't find that aspect that entertaining or interesting, which was really, really unfortunate. I think a big difference between me and Taylor here is that along the way, on his way to understanding what is going on, he also finds a lot of things that he absolutely loves. He feels like his imagination is really heightened. There's a lot of like philosophical themes and so on that he's really appreciating, and he is really enjoying the characters, which is making his journey so much more enjoyable. But unfortunately for me, none of those things that he's just mentioned here really spoke to me. But I just find it again so interesting how different readers can have such different experiences with a series. But yeah, let's just keep going.
One of my last thoughts here is I really do think that Malazan might be one of those series that people will connect with more when they get older and as they experience more things in life.
All right, that is a very interesting point, that you might enjoy it more as you get older. And I think that for some readers, that is definitely going to be the case. Now, I actually posted this video on my Discord because I was so excited about it. And there was a couple of people that said that they were way older than me and they didn't enjoy it at all. And I also know that Josh from Red Furry Books, he's like in his 40s, I believe. And he also said that he disagreed with this point, that you enjoy Malazan more as you get older. But I still think that this point maybe has a bit of merit, because I can definitely understand that the more you read, maybe your life experiences will, at least for some readers, make Malazan more enjoyable when you're a bit older. But I think that this is a very interesting point, and the main reason why I haven't totally DNF'd Malazan is because I do still think that maybe in 3 or 5 years time, when I pick it up, maybe this series will click for me. And just hearing how passionate he is about the series really makes me want to give the series another read. But yeah, definitely don't give Malazan to a 10-year-old. Alright, he's gonna react to my video now.
This video, and maybe I'll have a couple more things to say before we wrap things up.
Malazan fans, we need to talk. Basically, I read Deadhouse Gates. No, sorry, I read Gardens of the Moon around 2 years ago, and then I got around halfway through Deadhouse Gates, and I DNF'd it. Now, 3 months ago, I just felt the series starting to...
Difficult series to read if you're reading the books separated by years. There's too many storylines to keep up with. Now, you don't have to read it week after week, but you should be reading with only a couple months.
Sorry, I skipped a bit, but yeah, he just basically mentioned that he thinks that maybe I should have started all the way from Gardens of the Moon again, because I basically had like a 2-year break between Gardens of the Moon and Deadhouse Gates. But I actually did ask some Malazan veterans about where I should start now that I want to get back in the series. And some of them just said, just start from Deadhouse Gates, because it's a totally separate story and you don't really need to remember almost anything from Gardens of the Moon. So I actually did ask some Malazan veterans and they just said, read from Deadhouse Gates. But yeah, the series is so ridiculously dense. So I really think that you really shouldn't have too much time between book 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so on, because there's just way too much to remember. So I think this point has some merit. And I started to read this book all the way from page 1 to see if I will get to the end. And a big reason why I wanted to read this book is because a lot of people say that they change their mind about the series when they get to the end, because apparently the ending of this book is absolutely phenomenal. So,
and it is. The ending of Deadhouse Gates is absolutely phenomenal.
The amount of time people are going to tell me that the ending of Deadhouse Gates is phenomenal is just... I feel slightly bad for not having been able to finish this book, but it is what it is. If someone wants to spoil the ending of Deadhouse Gates for me, I don't mind. You can tell me. So before I give you an update of where I am with my Malazan journey, I would love to read some of those comments that you left, because yes, I did receive a couple of comments where people just said I probably wasn't smart enough to understand or enjoy the series, which, I mean, it might be true.
The thought process that, you have to be incredibly smart to read Malazan, I don't think that's true. I do think, though, what I said before, I think it has something to do with your life experiences and your own personal perspective. I think that does have a lot to do with whether or not you connect with Malazan. Not necessarily, it has nothing to do with your IQ or like whether or not you're smart. That doesn't make any sense.
Okay, let's just read some of these comments. Wanting to love something isn't the same as actually enjoying it. I'm sure Malazan fans wouldn't want you to keep reading something you don't enjoy.
That's hard to say. It's almost like, yes, if you don't enjoy something after a certain amount of time, you should stop reading. There's too many things to read in life, too many things to experience. You shouldn't be torturing yourself with something you don't enjoy. That being said, though, oftentimes the best things come after a little bit of struggle, Sometimes you got to work a little hard to get to the good stuff.
Yes, I love this, but to be fair, I do think that I have really struggled through the series and really tried my best. The fact that I read Guardians of the Moon, and then halfway through Deadass Gates. Then I took a couple years break, and then I read all the way from the start of Deadass Gates again, and read another 600 pages. And I really interacted with the community and talked with other booktubers and so on. And the fact that I still struggle with the series just really tells me that at least in this point in life, according to Taylor, this series is probably not for me. But yes, I think generally fantasy as a whole, you definitely have to struggle a bit to get into a story, but it is just so rewarding usually. But yeah, as I said so many times, Malazan is just extremely intense when it comes to how much work you have to put into it. Reading Malazan is like fact-finding mission. You are not spoon-fed, and you really have to pay attention to one-off lines, since those are usually the most explanatory as far as the mechanics of the world.
I think that's 100% true. You'll be following a POV, a bunch of different actions will be happening without any explanation. Two characters will start to have a conversation, and in that conversation there's going to be one paragraph in there where it all gets laid out and all the information is subtly dropped in that paragraph that you need to take away from the actions that have just recently happened.
Yeah, and I find this so interesting because reading Malazan, even though like all the books are like 1,000 pages each, it is almost reading short stories, which are like infamous for being extremely dense, but it's 10,000 pages of almost short stories where the information is so dense and almost every single line has a purpose in the story. Now, another thing that adds complexity to Malazan is that often the narrator or the characters are not reliable. So sometimes you are fed some tiny information and you're thinking, oh, maybe that is how things work. But actually this person doesn't really understand how the world works, or maybe he's lying or so on, which makes it even more challenging because you have to concentrate so intently, and then finally you understand something and you might be misled, just like this character is just misled. Now, I totally get how this can be ridiculously rewarding for some people, but just for me, it just became a bit too much. People say the ending is worth it, but really, if I'm not enjoying the first 9,999 pages, then I seriously doubt if I'll enjoy actually the ending, because if everything...
Yeah, but you're not that far in though. You're not 9,999 pages in.
Yes, I love that I made someone make this reaction. Sorry, Taylor.
Yeah, but you're not that far in though. You're not 9,999 pages in. You're not even 2,000. It's hard to say. I don't want to say you have to read 3,000 pages of the book. The ending of Deadhouse Gates is fantastic. And then Memories of Ice comes around, and oh my god, the battles and the action that happens in Memories of Ice, even if you don't understand what's going on, the people who've read that book, you know what I'm talking about. There's just some shit that goes down in Memories of Ice that was like jaw-dropping.
Man, I want to be in Taylor's camp so badly. And yeah, it's true. I haven't read the first 9,999 pages, but I have read around 1,400 pages, which I think is enough to at least make a judgment of whether this series is going to be for me, especially considering that I read around half of those pages twice. But yeah, the ending of Deadhouse Gates and Memories of Ice is the books or scenes that people keep mentioning again and again that I just really, really need to experience. And that might be the case, but I seriously doubt it. And I also read Furry books. He seems to be quite a similar reader as I, and he recently DNF'd Memories of Ice halfway through it because he just said he didn't enjoy it at all, which is probably also a reason why I don't feel that motivated, because if he doesn't enjoy it, and he has read way more than I do, and he seems to be quite a similar reader as I, and if he can get through it, and I'm already struggling now, then I just don't think this is going to be for me. But I have to be honest, hearing Taylor being so passionate about Malazan is seriously making me consider maybe I should just try to get through the end of Deadhouse Gates. I recently finished book 1, and from my understanding, these books are almost written to be reread.
I tell people this when I recommend them the series, is that, hey, there's a big percentage chance you're not going to like this. I think it makes a lot of sense why Library of Viking didn't enjoy the series, because he's reading so many books. It's going to be very hard for him to keep up with everything that's going on in Malazan, because, as I said, I think you need to read them sequentially and you need to keep it going one after another in order to remember and remind yourself of all the little details that are happening. It is all very important. Someone like me, I'm not making nearly as many videos and reading as many books as this guy. Malazan is taking up pretty much all of my reading time.
I think he's making a fair point here, but it's maybe also highlighting why the series isn't for me, because it is just simply too dense. If I cannot read a book in Malazan and then maybe take like 4 weeks break or 5 weeks breaks and come back to it, and I'll maybe be potentially ridiculously confused at that point, then I just think it's just a bit too much work for me. I don't mind putting effort into reading fantasy. I mean, I read a lot of fantasy books and a lot of them take a lot of work. There's just something about Malazan, or maybe the stage of life I'm in at the moment, where it just feels like it is just too much work, too much brain power, and also just the fact that I don't really relate to the characters, which is a big issue.
At the end of the day, I get why he didn't enjoy it, but I just wanted to put out my counterpoint for why I think you should give this series a shot.
I love this, and I must give credit to Taylor for being so incredibly respectful. He is a perfect representation of how we fans of different fandoms should act. So respectful. He very clearly articulates his viewpoints and why he disagrees with me. And I just love this so much. So yeah, if you're a Malazan fan, or even if you're not a Malazan fan, definitely check out this video and subscribe to him. I think he's still reading through Malazan and he's making videos along the way. So yeah, I definitely can't recommend enough subscribing to Taylor. But yeah, that is it. I had so much fun reacting to this. When I got a notification that someone had made a reacting to libraryofaviking, it just blew my mind and I just loved it so much. And Taylor, I must admit that having watched this video now for the second time, I feel a bit intrigued to maybe give Dead Cascades another try. Maybe I should really just push myself all the way to the end, because maybe I will enjoy the ending as much as you did. But yeah, thank you so much, Taylor, for making this video, and thank you so much for watching. And as always, a special thanks to my patrons for what we do here. I really appreciate it.